The Jaguars lose Calvin Ridley to their division rivals, the Tennessee Titans. We get into how this impacts the fantasy value for Trevor Lawrence, Will Levis, and Calvin Ridley himself on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk. When I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and NFL or fantasy analyst, I should say, at NFL Network.
Yes, and I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy, betting, and free agency, and the draft, whatever you need there at sportingnews.com, giving out the live grades for all the moves in free agency, and we'll have our team-by-team rankings and grades out as well to end the week.
Yes, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. So yesterday, we finally got news where Calvin Ridley is going to land. He goes to the Titans, which was a shocker because it seemed like it was down to the Patriots or the Jaguars, and then the Titans just blow us all away with his money. So we're going to get into how that impacts everybody. And then also, we'll discuss the free agents that are still left out there and where we hope that they land. So let's start right here with Calvin Ridley joining a Titans offense now that has Tony Pollard, DeAndre Hopkins, Treylon Burks. They still have Chigakonkwo, Tyjae Spears. Like, this is starting to become an interesting offense. How do you see Calvin Ridley's usage next year with across from DeAndre Hopkins?
Yeah, we're starting to figure out what the Titans want to do offensively. And it's interesting. You had Brian Callahan. He comes from the Bengals. He actually hired his high school classmate there as his offensive coordinator from the Jaguars, Nick Foles. So he obviously had a big influence in bringing Ridley from Jacksonville to Tennessee, just having that passing game experience there with Press Taylor and Doug Peterson. So it's kind of the Jaguars offense maybe mashed together with the Bengals offense, and maybe they have similar concepts as well. But when you look at it, yeah, this team definitely wants to get more dangerous in the passing game. I think they're going to make it work to keep Hopkins. We'll see what they can get, if anything, out of Treylon Burks here. I mean, if he could do anything as a third receiver now, that would be something, right? And then you have Tyjae Spears, Tony Pollard. They can be assets in the passing game as well. You mentioned Okonkwo, who's a pretty athletic tight end. They could unlock him a little bit more in this offense. So you have a lot of good qualities from Callahan and Foles here, where we know in Jacksonville they used Evan Ingram well, and they spread the ball into the middle of the field very well. So this could actually help Calvin Ridley, because I think he could be their slot guy, because DeAndre Hopkins can line up outside. You have Burks, if he gets you anything as kind of a big body number two. You get to this 11 personnel, we're going to see a lot of that. I mean, they've really come full circle here, because they used to be 12 personnel a lot with Arthur Smith. Now you're going to have three wide receivers on the field. So I think they just want to space things out, right? This says they want to be a spread offense where they have a lot of speed with Pollard and Spears out of the backfield. Okonkwo is a good athlete. So you would think, okay, they're going to spread the field. And Calvin Ridley was actually very good in the slot in Atlanta. He was very productive when they had Julio Jones playing off that. I think it's a much better fit than forcing him to be kind of the X receiver and the go-to guy. And Hopkins can handle that role. So when you look at that, I think it's going to be favorable coverage for him if Hopkins is there. I mean, Hopkins is still killing it. You got to think of him as a downfield threat. He also has the experience with Will Levis, so you'd expect him to be the attention getter a little bit more with the coverage. So I do like Ridley's chances here. I think the pressure will be off, right? I think there was a little bit of pressure to be the Jaguars number one, where in the end, it was probably Kirk and Ingram being more vital, and then Kirk got hurt, and then things got really out of whack, and Jones wasn't there either. So as long as there's some compliments there for Ridley, and he can get in the middle of the field, we saw what it did for CeeDee Lamb last year, that's going to be good for fantasy. So, look, if I had to pick between Hopkins or Ridley, I would say Ridley, because, again, Hopkins is getting older. Ridley is not that much younger than him, but I think in the middle of the field with Will Levis's deep arm, you're going to see a lot of progress from this passing game forget about this run-heavy offense. It's gone in Tennessee.
Yeah, that's exactly it. They don't have Derrick Henry anymore, and they go to Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. They're not going to be able to run the same way that they did when they had Derrick Henry back there. But I do think giving Will Levis, DeAndre Hopkins, and Calvin Ridley, two veteran wide receivers, with Ridley still, like, he can get open. He's still a really good route runner. He can get deep as well. And then you have DeAndre Hopkins that, you could just throw it up to him and he's going to come down with it, right? Like, he's still trustworthy that way. I think this is really a smart thing for the Titans to do, to see what they have in Will Levis. Now, when it comes to Calvin Ridley's fantasy upside, how much better can he be than he was with the Jags? So he saw 136 targets last year. I don't know if he's going to see that much in this offense with Hopkins, with Burks still being there. They re-signed Nick Westbrook and they still have a Okonkwo, and Spears and Pollard are going to get their targets as well. So I don't know if he's going to get the same amount of targets he got last year, but hopefully the efficiency increases, right? Hopefully he doesn't have a 55% catch rate again. But talking about all these weapons, does this now interest you in Will Levis for fantasy? Like, he's obviously would be like pretty much a last pick in your draft. He had that one really good fantasy day, his very first start. He put up 26 fantasy points and was just chucking it to DeAndre Hopkins nonstop. But then after that, all really, really poor fantasy days. Does this make you interested in him at all?
Well, you have to consider one thing. I don't think the Titans defense still is going to be very good. I think they're going to stink here. They're going to get better offensively without Mike Vrabel, but I think they'll take a few hits defensively. So you could see this team trailing in a lot of passing here, and I think that's what they want to do anyway. This is not built to be a power running team anymore. So you got to blow up what we're thinking about. We know the Bengals were pretty heavy on the pass. The Jaguars would force the issue with the pass. So the tools are there for Will Levis. I think the one concern you have is the pass protection. I think they could get a little bit better there to keep him upright. I think Lloyd Cushenberry is going to help at center because they're really bad in pass protection up the middle. Peter Skronsky is there, but they really need to address offensive tackle. And I would think now with the Ridley signing, full speed ahead. They don't have to go after Malik Neighbors or looking at any receiver there at that spot, right? If it's Rome Odunze, they're going to pass at this point. They need to get an offensive tackle, right? And there's a couple guys there. Look at Joe Alt and Fashanu there at Penn State that they can look at right away to put in the lineup, replace Andre Dillard. So I think that's the next step here for Will Levis. It's kind of been a two off-season process here for Will Levis. So, yeah, he's a nice sleeper. He's got a big arm. He can run around a little bit. The weapons are there. And, again, you got to blow up everything you thought about this Titans offense because it's completely different now. And so, yeah, I'm going to take him. There's a bit of a flyer with Will Levis, and you can get him super cheap. No one's still going to bang the table for him at any point in the draft.
No, he's still going to go super late. But now let's go over to the Jaguars side, right? Because now Trevor Lawrence loses Calvin Ridley, his top wide receiver target. This will bump up Christian Kirk, right, in targets. This bumps up Evan Ingram even more. Evan Ingram led this team in targets last year at 143. So he has to be considered a super high volume tight end this year. But do the Jaguars make a move? There's rumors right now about Brandon Ayuk going to the Jaguars. I do think, with Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars offense, they need a true wide receiver one. That's kind of like how their offense works. And they tried to make Calvin Ridley that last year. They didn't have the best connection. Do they go get someone? Because I don't think it can just be Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis and you say, Trevor Lawrence, do your thing. They need to figure out if they should pay Trevor Lawrence the big bucks or not. And I don't think you're going to be able to figure that out fully if you don't give him a true wide receiver one.
Yeah, we have to see what happens with Zay Jones. I think he's going to be cleared off the field, so that could keep him intact there in their offense. And he was pretty valuable. Strangely, we know Trevor Lawrence put up some really good numbers when Zay Jones was in the lineup. And keep in mind, Lawrence also really missed Kirk down the stretch. When he got hurt, really, Kirk has been the best go-to guy for Lawrence over the past two seasons, working inside all over the field. They have a good rapport. And Ingram, of course, on the inside. So maybe this is an inside-outside type of offense, right, involving Travis Etienne in the passing game as well. So something to consider there with Lawrence going forward. Now, Gabe Davis gives them a bit of a deep threat. It's interesting to see what type of receiver they might target in the draft. If they go after Brandon Ayuk, then you're in business here. But Gabe Davis, it doesn't give us too much confidence here replacing Ridley. It's just another more inconsistent player who doesn't have the history of production that Ridley did. So they're going to have to do something, Michelle. I don't know where they're going to go. Maybe they add a little bit more speed on the inside here to help Kirk. I don't know. They have many ways of approaching this, but you're right. They need to do something here to get a big season out of Trevor Lawrence so they can justify and feel good about making him basically the only guy from that draft class who gets paid big money.
Yeah, and if we're going to bump him up our fantasy rankings this next year, he needs to have more weapons than just Kirk Ingram and Gabe Davis. Like, those are fine, but you need a true wide receiver one as well in there. We're going to get into guys that are remaining in free agency. There's still some big names out there that we're waiting for landing spots. So we're going to talk about those in our upcoming segment. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. I've used the Game Time app so many times, I cannot even count them because of how many times I bought Steelers tickets at the last minute, how many times I bought Astros tickets at the last minute. Anytime I decide to go somewhere, a comedy show, a sporting event, I know I can jump on the Game Time app. I'm going to get the best deal. I'm going to feel very good about where I'm sitting because I can see where I'm sitting, and I get the tickets so fast. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. And tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Take the guessing work out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Again, you just create an account on the Game Time app, redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Before we get into more of this free agency goodness, I want to let you know Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern, be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right off the bat here, I know people are excited about Marquise Brown. I'm personally more excited to see where Mike Williams lands. I think he's the better wide receiver right now. I think he's the best one on the market with Calvin Ridley now off of it. Mike Williams, I know he gets injured a lot, but last week when you were out, I talked about him as a buy option in Dynasty. I still think he can be a very good fantasy asset if he can stay healthy. And if he lands in a favorable spot, I think he still has a ton of juice left in him. Tore his ACL early September. I think he's had plenty of time to recover. I think he'll be good to go. I want to see him with the Bills. Vinny, where do you want to see him?
Yeah, it's interesting. The Bills used to have a Mike Williams on their team. There's been quite a few Mike Williamses who have kind of cycled through the NFL. But when you look at this Mike Williams, I mean, the concern are the injuries. They've been piling up over his career. That's kind of limited him from really hitting that upside as a first-round pick out of Clemson, where he has the body type, he has the field stretching ability. And last year we loved him. And keep in mind, a couple of years ago, he was massive in fantasy with all the touchdowns and all the things he was doing. So that's been the only concern. He's got a body, and the way he kind of runs routes and gets hits low and high, he kind of sets himself up for a little bit for injuries. But that's also what makes him a really good fantasy asset when he's on the field, because he's big, can stretch the field when needed, is a big body in the red zone. When he was his best fantasy asset, he was a scoring machine. So there's that potential if he land on a top offense. Is it the Chiefs? Is it the Bills? Does somehow, any of these teams where he's a complimentary guy, but he can stretch a field, much like he was with Keenan Allen. So you look at all these options, and will the Bengals possibly, swap out T. Higgins and say, hey, Mike Williams, he's very similar from the same school. So things you can consider here. We talked about the Cardinals as well, but I think right now Cardinals are probably locked in more into Marvin Harrison Jr. So yeah, there's a lot of ways you could look at Williams. I think he's a worthy flyer for many teams. Again, the health is going to be the concern with him, but depending on the level of upside of the passing game he lands with, we're going to be interested. If it's like a bargain basement type team, or like say the Bears go after
Yeah.
him, I don't know if I'm going to be all that interested. I think maybe you look at him as a wide receiver 3, but in the right offense, he could be a wide receiver 2 with some upside.
Yeah, if he goes to like the Panthers or the Bears or something, probably not going to be thrilled. Even though, with Caleb Williams, maybe, but yeah, it's not going to be as exciting if he lands with a veteran quarterback that we already know has a big arm and we're confident in. But I still think he has a ton left in him. Now, Marquise Brown, this is a guy that you've been excited to see where he lands. You still think he has some juice left in him. Are you surprised that no team has signed him yet? Like, what's going on? Why is he still out there?
Yeah, to be fair, I've never been a big Marquise Brown fan. Like, I think he's really good at doing one thing, but that one thing doesn't happen consistently, right? Stretching the field, speed. He came out like gangbusters with Lamar Jackson in his first ever game, but then we thought, okay, he's going to Kyler Murray. This is going to be great. He's reunited with his college quarterback. It didn't quite happen for him. He was banged up through the season, but he's a limited receiver. I wouldn't say he's the complete number one. That said, I have an interesting landing spot developing for him. It's a team he came from, the Ravens, at this point. They just said goodbye to Odell Beckham Jr. They need a field stretcher there. I mean, why wouldn't they think about him right back in this offense? If this offense actually might suit him better than what was there with Greg Roman before. So he also could be a cheap option for the Chargers that just got rid of Mike Williams, right? That he can stretch the field a little bit, play off the running game, and similar kind of feeling, right? Greg Roman has been his coach as well, and he had a productive fantasy season under Roman there. So something to look at. Maybe Brown is the cheap option to replace Williams. So I think the Ravens and Chargers actually could be in play for him. Now, Marquise, again, I wish he was a little bit more complete. I need him to go where there's a technician, somebody who's going to be the go-to guy, like a Keenan Allen, and then maybe he can stretch the field and make big plays where he gets favorable coverage against like number 2 corners that he can torch.
Yeah, and everyone's going to want a wide receiver with the Chiefs. We'll see if they just wait
Yeah.
to the draft or if
I want that to happen, but
they haven't brought anyone in. I don't know if they're going to. Maybe they'll just focus in on the draft. But Marquise Brown, it looks like he's going to go somewhere cheap, which is also not great for fantasy. Like you feel a little bit better when they spend up and they want to utilize them, right? But still waiting on his landing spot. Then there's 2 old guys, right? And sorry, they're younger than me. So when I say old, they're still younger than me by like a couple months. But Odell Beckham Jr. and Michael Thomas. Do either of these guys have anything left in the tank? OBJ just got cut by the Ravens. Michael Thomas cut by the Saints. Anything left if they were to join a new team? Because I don't think so. I think they're both done.
Yeah, for the record, they're both much younger than me. But at this point, when you look at OBJ and Michael Thomas, like, yeah, they just don't thrill me. Like, Michael Thomas has just backed himself in a corner, right? He can't stay healthy. He complained about how he was getting treated on the injury reports and all that. I think he's just been a headache to deal with on top of not being available. So I don't know. I thought he was a limited receiver to begin with. And what happened with his production, it pretty much came with Drew Brees right at the end of it. Like, since Drew Brees has left there, Michael Thomas not only has not done much, he's disappeared. He's not really stayed on the field. And Odell, look, he was going there for like maybe a 3 or 4 game stretch for the Ravens, and then they just like, we're tired of you. We're not throwing to you all that much in games that count. Like, I thought he was going to be a bigger factor in the playoffs. He disappeared. So this could be it for OBJ. So OBJ and Michael Thomas, big names, but this is what you fall into. I think we did that with Julio Jones a little bit, right? When he was near the end of his career. Just don't go chase these guys. I mean, AJ Green, you could say that to some degree with the Cardinals. Yeah, they're just old. They were names that you drafted in the first round 5 or 6 years ago, but that's 5 or 6 years ago. That's a long time. It's an eternity in the NFL for a wide receiver.
Yeah, and Tyler Boyd's another guy that used to be somewhat fantasy relevant and now hasn't been with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. But Boyd is 29 years old, will be 30 in November. There's rumors about him going to the Steelers. I guess there's mutual interest. Steelers need a wide receiver because they traded Deontay Johnson. It makes sense. Boyd went to Pitt University. I don't know. Does this help Russell Wilson at all? Does this help George Pickens? I still wouldn't be interested in Tyler Boyd for fantasy. I don't love it, but I guess they need some bodies because I went through the wide receivers they have on their depth chart on yesterday's show, and it's not pretty.
Yeah, they need somebody, and there's nobody that's like a technical receiver. George Pickens is a big play type guy. Calvin Austin is a speed quickness guy. So they don't have a guy that runs routes, get open. That's what Tyler Boyd does. It's not juicy, it's not exciting if he's a complimentary guy, but he's going to help a quarterback out. He's going to be out there on third down and run those routes in the middle of the field, and he's going to be reliable in the slot. So, yeah, he's a slot receiver. We're already having a low upside with him in fantasy at this stage of his career. When he was productive, he was the only thing the Bengals had going before T. Higgins and Jamar Chase were there. And look, he had a wide receiver 3 finish a couple years ago because this passing game was so good for the Bengals. But I think those days are over. I think you're more going to look at bumping up that quarterback wherever Tyler Boyd goes.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And then 2 running backs. So I guess technically 3, right? There's J.K. Dobbins, A.J. Dillon, and Zeke Elliott. These are guys that could all have somewhat of a fantasy impact if they land somewhere. The Cowboys still have a massive hole. Do they bring in one of these guys? But specifically here, because I don't really care about A.J. Dillon. I don't really care where he signs. He's not going to interest me. But J.K. Dobbins, so he tears his Achilles in week 1. I do think he could be ready to start the season. We know he's talented. Do you think he gets a starting job anywhere? Could it be the Cowboys? What about the Buccaneers? We were saying Rachaad White. We were worried about him, right, being replaced. So far, he's been pretty safe unless they go early in the draft. But J.K. Dobbins, do you see him getting a lead job anywhere?
I think teams are going to wait and add him for depth. I mean, he's a guy that's had major injuries. I mean, he just has not been on the field. So it's really hard to feel good about him. Like you have to take a flyer on him to say, okay, he has some upside, but that's about it. Maybe the Chargers go back to him and say, hey, we got Gus Edwards. We need another back because Joshua Kelly is a free agent. We'll add you to Greg Roman, see what we can do here with this Ravens backfield moving all the way to Los Angeles. So I don't know. I mean, I think Dobbins is a major flyer. He's much like the Vikings taking a shot on Cam Akers, right? Last year, it's just like, the name sounds okay and the upside might be there, but the injury history there, the disappointment is majorly there. So, yeah, I can't feel good about Dobbins. A.J. Dillon, look, he's not exciting, but if he lands on the Cowboys, we're going to pay attention, right? There's nothing else there. It's a Rico Dowdle and him. And if he gets the opportunities to score in a high scoring offense, as we mentioned with the Cowboys, then we're going to pay a little attention. So, really, Dillon, he has to go to a good landing spot in the system. If he's going to a committee again, maybe he ends up in Minnesota, who knows, with Aaron Jones. I'm not going there. So I think Dillon, Cowboys, I'm going to listen a little bit to see what he could do here. And look, I still think the Cowboys are going to draft a back here going forward. But I think Dillon, again, not exciting, but he's a guy in the right system that can put up touchdowns at least for you.
Yeah. I think if I'm the Cowboys, I bring in J.K. Dobbins, draft a guy, and go that way. So you have 2 shots there to hit on somebody. You already know A.J. Dillon's not it. So,
yeah.
And talking about not it, in our final segment, we're going to talk about the Patriots offense, because after free agency, I can't think of an offense that is going to be worse next year. And we're going to try to fix it. We're going to try to fix it for them. What would we do to fix it? So that's how we're going to close out the show here in our next segment.
Yeah, it should be exciting, and we'll try to find some answers there. It's going to be quite difficult, but we'll try to make it work. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? That's right. Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to your IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to our IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker dealer. All right, Michelle, the Patriots. I don't know if we're going to be investing too much in the Patriots here in fantasy again. It could be just the backfield and Ramondre Stevenson and maybe a flyer on Antonio Gibson. But let's set the table. I'll do that really quick, then you can get into it. Right now, their quarterback depth chart reads like this. It's Jacoby Brissett, Bailey Zappi, and Nathan Rourke, just to throw in there. He was with the Jaguars last year for a cup of coffee. They didn't get Calvin Ridley. I heard so many reports the Patriots are going after Calvin Ridley. Well, so much for that. They're stuck with Kendrick Bourne, whom they resigned, Juju Smith-Schuster, Demario Douglas. They actually let Devontae Parker go to the Eagles in free agency. They signed Jalen Reagor to replace him. Okay. Tyquan Thornton and Keyshawn Boutte, who's been disappointing out of LSU. Antonio Gibson they added there to be their new backup with Ezekiel Elliott gone. And Austin Hooper replaced Mike Gesicki as Hunter Henry's backup, who was also re-signed. So there's the table for you. Are you eating anything off that menu?
Listen, their wide receivers are so bad right now that I know. So they have a top 3 pick. Cool. You only get to take one player from that. And yes, there's 3 quarterbacks that are sitting right there where they say it's Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels and Drake May. They're going to get one of those 3 guys, right? But who in the world are they going to pass to? Because the best guy that you named off that list is Kendrick Bourne, and he's coming off a torn ACL. So not great. And Juju, I don't know if anything's left there for him. Demario Douglas is fine as maybe a wide receiver 3, but he should really be a wide receiver 4. My thing, the only way I can see this offense progressing this year at all, because I don't think you want to bring in Drake May with this or Jaden Daniels. I think they're going to fail because they have nothing around them. Trade for Justin Fields. You can probably trade for him right now with a 4th round pick. Trade for Justin Fields. You get him, and then you can use that number 3 over pick on Marvin Harrison Jr. and see if Fields with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kendrick Bourne and Demario Douglas, if they can get something going. And if you can, then you got you got Justin Fields. You found your next quarterback. If not, then they'll probably lose a lot of games anyways. You can take a quarterback next year. But I just don't know if this is the right time to be taking a quarterback when they have literally nothing to offer this rookie quarterback. They are going to suffer, and that can really ruin a player's career right off the bat and just mess with their, with their mind, and it could ruin their career. So I think that would be the way I'd go. Trade for Fields, draft Marvin Harrison Jr., and see if you can get that to work.
Yeah, another way I might go if I'm the Patriots is trade for Fields, but also draft Jaden Daniels, because you can run similar offenses with these guys. And you have
Who are they going to pass to?
Yeah, I know, but you've got to take a shot at the quarterback. I mean, they said goodbye to Mac Jones. They're not going to go forward with Jacoby Brissett. It's just not going to happen. So you need to find something. It's hard, right? The Patriots and taking wide receivers into the draft, not been their thing. Maybe it'll change without Bill Belichick there, but I don't know really what to expect, except I think this team is going to be a run-heavy offense. Once again, they're looking at the offensive line. That's their strength. That's
Do they have the personnel to be a run-heavy offense? I don't think so. Stevenson hasn't proved that he can stay healthy. I also just don't think you want to give him 250 carries.
It's not a high upside rushing offense. Let me just say that. It's a volume-based rushing offense, right? They're just going to be kind of a run-heavy team because of the defensive mindedness still of their team, with Gerard Mayo taking over. And again, Van Pelt, and that's what the Browns' identity was here before they had Deshaun Watson and opened it up a little bit. So it's interesting what they have. And number 2, I guess number 3 pick, I should say, but they're going to have the second option there. Is it going to be Drake May? Is it going to be Jaden Daniels? That's what we have to consider here. I don't know if Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be the direction they go in unless they can get Fields. So I think you're right. I thought that could be a good way for the Bears to go, get Marvin Harrison Jr., keep Justin Fields. Maybe it happens instead in New England, right? Where you don't have to spend that much. You don't have to use a first-round high pick there to get Fields anymore. So maybe this might change their philosophy. I still would think about Jaden Daniels if you think he has higher upside than Fields. But again, the one thing I would say, if Daniels goes to either team, the Commanders or Patriots, I'm going to be somewhat interested in him because he's such a good runner. He's very explosive, and we know those type of players. He could be this year's Anthony Richardson, right? Where he has that ability to just take off and run regardless of the team he's on. So if he lands with the Patriots after Ramondre Stevenson, he actually might be someone I'm interested in, because I can't right mind go after any of these weapons. But if he's cheat code running here and he throws a few touchdowns, and then you might be in business here with Daniels. He is a deep ball thrower. So it'll be interesting to see where they go at quarterback. But you're right. They got to do a lot of work around the quarterback to really feel comfortable. But I wouldn't go anywhere with these individual passing assets, even Henry, in the season.
Yeah, I just think if they're going to sit there and take Jaden Daniels at 3, I do think Justin Fields and Jaden Daniels have the same exact opportunity to still be good in the NFL. So instead of using the number 3 overall pick on the same type of guy, just go trade a 4th rounder for him. And then you can actually get him one of the best weapons to come out in a really long time at wide receiver. And I think that would be huge. I just think that makes so much more sense. And even just talking about age, I mean, Fields is like barely a year older than Jaden Daniels. So I would much rather go that route. I think that's how you fix your offense faster instead of, I mean, if you take Daniels at the 3rd overall pick and he fails, you're putting yourself behind a really long time. If you go trade a 4th for Fields and you take Marvin Harrison Jr., you can move on from Fields the very next year. You're not putting yourself backwards at all. So that's the way I would go. And then in that case, then I would start to be interested in Ramondre Stevenson. But if this is the offense that they're coming into with a rookie quarterback, with no one for him to pass to, and Ramondre Stevenson is being asked to carry this team, I just don't think it's going to be efficient at all in this offense. It's going to be disgusting.
Yeah, and then don't forget, we talked about Antonio Gibson. He could steal some receptions there from Stevenson, and that makes him less appealing if you have a young quarterback throwing checkdowns or whatnot. And we talked about if it's a running quarterback, such as Fields or Daniels, where you might not get those checkdowns as much. They'll take off and run. That's been the history with a lot of these guys who can run, including Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts. So something to also keep in mind there. So a lot of layers here for the Patriots. But one thing I'll say, Michelle, I don't think the Patriots are going to be competitive at all in the AFC East. This is going to be the other 3 teams. That's where I'm investing most of my fantasy football draft capital, on the other 3 teams if I'm going anywhere in this division.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it for today's show. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every dayers, Vinnie and I will be back tomorrow. It'll be our last show of the week to close out free agency, the big week of free agency. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.